Welcome to the Sourcing Hero podcast, produced by Una, a group purchasing organization that empowers sourcing heroes, and Art of Procurement, the world's largest procurement podcast network. I'm your host, Kelly Barnard. The goal of the Sourcing Hero podcast is to capture the epic stories of people who are rising up and beating the odds to create exceptional value within procurement, directly from those heroes themselves. Today, my guest here on the Sourcing Hero podcast is one of the authors of the book, The 5 Disciplines of Inclusive Teams, Unlocking Collective Power to Achieve Breakthroughs. Andrés Tapia now leads the Andrés Tapia Strategy Group, and we're very glad to have him with us today to talk about his work as well as the book. So hi, Andrés. Thank you so much for being with me.
Well, Kelly, thank you so much for having me on. Looking forward to our conversation.
As am I. Now, before we jump ahead, I'm always eager to get to books. Before we jump ahead to the book, let's pause and learn a little bit more about you. What do you find that it's helpful for people to know about your professional journey up to this point?
Yes, well, I just finished 12 years of being at Korn Ferry, a wonderful organization, and I've been in corporate for 25 plus. But I've always had an inkling that as an innovator and a disruptor, that eventually I wanted to not be bound by the limits of a corporation, which are legitimate, about keeping balance. So an innovator can only innovate so much before they go, okay, that's good enough. So I've always wanted to just be fully on my own and really bring forth some ideas fully. So, but the other thing you should know, and that listeners should know, I'm a writer by background. So I started as a journalist. I wanted to be a foreign correspondent. And it's a long story, which I won't get into now, but I ended up as the accidental corporate executive and senior partner strategist. But it's been a wonderful journey. Yeah.
Awesome.
And I'm from Lima, Peru, which I'm very proud of. So.
And you absolutely should be. And it's so funny that you talk about always sort of having this dream of wanting to do something with a little bit more freedom. I can't speak for every single one of our listeners and watchers, but I can tell you you're preaching to the choir in your host. The way I've always explained it to people, I had quote unquote real jobs for a long time too. I'm now officially uncrate trained for anybody who has dogs, who does the sort of crate training thing. Putting me back in the box at this point would be like, all the legs and arms going in all different directions. And so welcome to the wild side. I'm glad you're getting the opportunity to live out this part of your professional dream.
Just now, I'm in the middle of it. So
Excellent.
Comrades in this is wonderful.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of being in the middle of it, I actually want to acknowledge right up front. So it's your book about inclusive teams coming out now, us talking about it now. There's been sort of a shift in tone, not necessarily around the principle of inclusivity, but around, the receptivity or the formality of DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in corporations. Can you talk a little bit? Certainly, you're welcome to acknowledge that head on, but most definitely, what is it that you mean and your co-author when you talk about inclusivity in the book?
Yeah, and actually, before I answer you directly, I do want to acknowledge my wonderful friend and colleague, my co-author, Michel Buffet.
Absolutely.
Just because he had client things he had to juggle, but he and I co-wrote this book, and we're both senior partners, and it's been a wonderful ride with him. So I just wanted to thank Michel and acknowledge that he's been part of the effort.
Absolutely.
So having done that, look, I've been in the diversity, equity, inclusion space for a long time, but fundamentally, I've always been underneath that. I've been an enterprise-wide strategist, and a strategist that helps organizations solve problems. That's what strategists do, and help them see around the corner as a thought leader and almost like a workforce futurist. And so that's been part of it. So a more diverse workforce it was many years ago part of the future, and now it's the present. So whatever's happening with the terminology, it doesn't change the reality that the workforce is more diverse than it ever has been in history. And that to talk about the workforce is to talk about diversity. To talk about talent is to talk about diversity. To talk about teams is to talk about diversity and inclusion, because our premise here is that, organizations with their greatest assets being their people should be, and many times they're not tuned in. This should be one to optimize their greatest asset, which is their people, and leave no one behind so they can help everyone rise to the fullness of potential. And that's what motivated us to write the book. How do you manage this complex diversity, which is about everything?
Of course.
Styles, biographical backgrounds, DNA, occupational diversity, geographic diversity, hobby and cause diversity, right? And the communications diversity. So it's all about that, right? And then how do you take this wonderful mix, which can be contentious because conflict exists because of difference. I mean, those go together. No difference, no conflict. So if you have a more diverse team or workforce, you're going to have more conflict unless you master managing it inclusively. And that we went after.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So this particular audience, one of the things that we always talk about is the fact that, nobody was a kid dressing up as a procurement and sourcing professional for Halloween, right? Nobody was 10 years old and their aunt or uncle said, oh, little so-and-so, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be in corporate procurement, right? Said no one ever. And so you have all these people that consider themselves a professional community, but you've got somebody from operations, you've got somebody from marketing, you've got lots of people from sales in our ranks. My background is in English literature, right? We're from all over the place. So that's just one dimension of diversity. But back to your point around building all of those strengths into a team, how do leaders and managers create that connectivity so that you actually have a cohesive, functioning whole?
And by the way, just because you mentioned procurement, I have to say that being a supply chain engineer or manager of process improvement, it's become pretty sexy because when you have the
I
COVID
agree.
and the tariff disruption and the globalization disruption, suddenly it's like it's a thing to be. So I just want to acknowledge that maybe some kids might want to dress up as supply chains.
Maybe not. I'm going to be watching this Halloween. It's that moment, where is my stuff? And we were like, I'm ready for my spotlight. Like, this is the big moment.
Exactly. But listen, to your question, we worked with our colleagues in the Korn Ferry Institute to answer the question, what is the secret sauce for diverse teams to really be optimal in their performance where the total is greater than the sum of the parts, number one. And how do we understand the recipe for a correlation that has been clearly established? The more diverse teams managed inclusively lead to greater innovation. That you can look at many studies, Korn Ferry, McKinsey, BCG, and it all land in the same place. But no one knows how it happens. It just kind of, there's something about a group of people and all their beautiful diversity and happen to have good managers, they kind of stumble into great innovation. But Michelle and I went out to crack the code. Can we crack the code? Can we? Because if we can, then we can make it more systematic. We can, rather than expect that it will happen organically and by happenstance, and maybe it could be more predictive, and it could be accelerated, and it could be scaled. So in our research, we developed a point of view backed by multiple inclusive teams. You want to know what they are?
I would love to know what they are.
All right. So the first one is connecting to build affiliation. The other one is caring to nurture psychological safety.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is synchronizing to harness collective intelligence. The next one is cultural dexterity to integrate diverse perspectives. And the final one is power sharing to ensure equitable contribution. And I'll talk about the first two and then see if you have any questions, and I'll talk about the rest. But connecting and caring in our model, they hold the three in the middle, they kind of hug them.
Okay.
And they sound like the same, but they're different. And the distinction we made is that they're both about empathy, but one is about cognitive, intellectual empathy, and the other one is about heart and emotive empathy. So we believe that connecting is about really learning about the fullness of the academic, educational, certification, and work experience of my colleagues around the table or around the Zoom, because many times, almost every time, we only know a sliver of what our teammates bring. Think about a team comes together and say, what's your title? How long have you been here? And maybe perhaps where you were before you worked here. Now, if you think about yourself, Kelly, and you put yourself in those situations, or any of your listeners, just think right now, if you did that exercise, how much does the rest of the team not know about you? Just from a work experience.
Yeah.
And to your point, how many would not know that you studied English, right? And somebody else was a Peace Corps volunteer in Nigeria. And somebody else was a refugee from the Middle East, and somebody else, came undocumented and legalized and came here. Somebody else was actually an aerospace engineer that became a cartoonist, right? So we have several tactical things to help this cognitive empathy to say, who are you? Who's my teammate? What resources are here? And one simple question among several, we have a checklist, but one that we have in the book is simply to ask, in your educational training or work experience, what is one formative experience you've had that influences how you think and work today? And all kinds of things happen. And guess what? People tell us, I've known Kelly for 15 years and I never knew that about her.
Yeah.
So think how much we leave on the table, which to have an effective, optimal team, the more I know what's in the toolkit of each of my teammates that is beyond what I can see and beyond what I presume based on the title, amazing. Okay, that's one. And then the caring, that's where the classic inclusion one, to say, who is Kelly? Who is each of these listeners? Like identity, and I can see you, but I don't want to surmise, but how do you identify, Kelly, your life roles and your journey and your gender, I don't know which of those elements are important defining aspects of how you see yourself and how you bring yourself and how you present yourself and how you want people to see you. So if you put those two things together, we actually have a rubric that we recommend that I could share if you want to really open this up.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure that we get information or access to any of those resources. I will tell you, Andres, do you know what I was actually thinking while you were talking about that? Sort of I don't know, we have maybe 1% of somebody's identity, right? This is not just a workplace issue. This is a family issue. This is a community issue. Do you know what I'm saying? Even in a very traditional situation, first thing sort of pops into mind for me is, okay, I go to the local middle school to pick up one of my kids, and there's the teacher. We instantly assume that we know most of what we need to know about this person because of the role that they're in or the environment or circumstances we see them in. This seems to me like a practice that wouldn't just improve professional teams. It individually can improve the way that each one of us interacts with all of the people around us in all spheres of our life.
Yeah, imagine, and this is a true story, the lit female teacher who was a black belt in judo.
Right.
Doesn't that change kind of how you think about her?
Absolutely, it does. For one thing, you turn your homework in on time. You would not mess with assignment deadlines by any means. But we truly don't know. I mean, people's hobbies, it does start to give you a different perspective on them.
Yeah.
Now, what are the other three pieces that go inside of that in your framework?
Yeah, so synchronizing to harness collective intelligence. This is based on a lot of neuroscience, and this is really exciting. And this is kind of new stuff. So neuroscientists are now understanding how beautifully complex and powerful our brains are. So we know that different parts of our brain, if you stimulate them, they light up feelings of joy or feelings of sadness or different forms of thinking. The prefrontal cortex is executive function, logical, and then there's other parts of the brain that are just more risk-taking and more imaginative, and that music and percussion and beautiful things and actually people's voices actually stimulate different parts of the brain. So if you think about corporate or work, we over-index on using our prefrontal cortex because we got to be logical, we got to be, managed by the numbers. It's all legitimate. But in a world of disruption where we have to innovate and think outside the box, and we keep thinking inside this one box of prefrontal cortex, then we're leaving untouched different parts of our own brains. In the same way as we talked about talent in the team, we're leaving other parts of other people's experiences and identities out. Well, we're leaving other parts of our stimulating brain off of the activity of thinking and creating and problem solving. Number one. Yeah. Number two, neuroscientists have identified that in a group of people, our electrical currents going through our brains start to influence each other's. And when you and I say, oh, that team had great chemistry, we've always thought of it as a metaphor. Well, it's actually physically true.
Interesting.
Our chemistry of our brains are actually, if we are in sync, in flow, in synchronicity, we've sort of established a connectivity that suddenly the group is in sort of have found their rhythm. And there's a couple metaphors we use to illustrate this. One is percussion. I love drum circles, and I'm part of them, and I lead them, or I'm a participant, and I actually bring them into my training. Why? Because first of all, if you're going to have an innovation workshop, you want to stimulate different parts of the brain, and you want to create psychological safety. And a drum circle with a drum master can really help you have fun, but also you activate a different part of your brain. And here's the metaphor: drumming, everybody's kind of offbeat a little bit, but then if you keep going, you will get an entrainment, and you get a
Okay.
finally you go, there's the rhythm, there's the rhythm, there's the rhythm, right? And you find the common rhythm, but then you also find the syncopated rhythm. So the personalization of each individual's unique personality. So, and then the other one about synchronizing, and you can bring this in the workplace. Imagine the peloton in the Tour de France.
Yeah.
In the Tour de France, it's really complex because you have one winner, wears a yellow, jacket at the end, the yellow jersey. But at the end, there's an individual winner and a team winner. And when they're running the race and they're pedaling the race through the Alps and the cobblestones and the freeways and the marshes, right? They are both competing. Everybody's competing against each other. Like a corporation, everybody's trying to advance, and there's sort of like competition, but everybody has to work together. So in my team, one of us is going to be the winner, not all of us. I'm competing against them as well as the other team members, but we also want to win as a team. So, and then the peloton, there's a norm that you have to take turns being on the front of the line to cut the wind for the rest of them so they can draft behind you. And everybody has to take their turn. And everybody, in a sense, is helping the others position themselves to win. So that's a metaphor for teams. We're in competition with each other. We want the promotion. We want the special assignment. We want to do it honorably and not in a backhanded way. But you also have to collaborate. If you don't collaborate, you don't have a chance to be promoted and to advance, right?
Yeah.
And so there's multiple ways in the book we talk about how do you achieve that synchronicity, and you achieve the elevated sense of not just these individuals doing their own little thing, but in coming together with all these things I'm talking about, you stimulate higher level thinking that leads to innovation, better performance.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is we talk about all these different factors. Obviously, the end goal is to make your team more inclusive. And I'm sure there are natural things that disrupt that. You could move buildings, you could all go work remotely, you could introduce a new team member, right? And they have to be sort of incorporated. There's also probably almost seasonality to it, depending on the role where the team is more or less synchronized at different times, to sort of use your word. But if we try to think about a generalized baseline, is there a way that you recommend either a team as a whole or a leader that wants to advance in this area, trying to figure out, it's not that are we inclusive or are we not, but how inclusive are we currently? And so therefore, what do we need to do to continue down that road of becoming more inclusive?
Well, I haven't done this for 25 years plus. No team that I've met is as inclusive as it could be.
Yeah.
Every team is self-optimizing, and there's people full of character and good intentions and skills, but this is a dance. I love to dance, but there's all kinds of different forms of dance, and you can always dance better no matter how good you are. And there's always that extra step that you always miss, right? Or there's a new rhythm that you never learned that you need to be coached in. And once you do and you expand your repertoire, you just have more fun and you can dance with more people. Same with this, right? You can have a well-functioning team. I'm not denying that there aren't any, but what if you could be even better? And as we have fewer resources and more volatility and more disruption, more change, we all have to up our game, not only as individual professionals, right? But also as teams. And by the way, why do we believe in teams? Because we believe that teams are the smallest unit of culture. That those days of top-down directive, the CEO says this, and then this change management in a really cascading way, that is at the speed of change right now. By the time that change directive hits the middle management and below, the world would have changed. And CEOs of leading edge companies are now driving decision-making to the middle organization at the team level. And now teams are being asked to do more, but they're the ones that rise up to, they go, okay, we're finally getting empowered to do what we know how to do because we are in the front lines. We see the customer, we see the production line, right? We know what to do, as opposed to the suits in the C-suite just trying to guess what it is that we need, right? So that, I believe, the benchmark, I would say, is no team is as inclusive as it needs to be. Every team can get better.
Yeah. I know it's very hard to boil this down to sort of a simple piece of advice, but if we wanted to give people a place to start, is there something simple that you offer up and you say, hey, look, even if you just want to do one thing to understand your team better, to start, building momentum in this direction, what is a straightforward piece of advice that you could maybe offer to our listeners?
Yeah, I would, I might actually come back to the rubric I promised you here, because it's very simple. Now, this is presuming you set the right context and you're not coming out of the blue and asking this, but you set the stage right. But it's 3 questions. 1, what is one thing about you I don't know you want me to know? What's one thing about you I don't know you want me to know? I'm not going to presume to know, regardless of what you look like. What is it you want me to know? I don't know. And it's in the work context, right? So it's about that. Number 2, if you could be more of that here in the workplace, how would that enhance your ability to bring your whole self to work and do better work? And number 3, what do you need from me to be more you? That's a great place to start. And it starts getting into the connecting, caring. It sets the stage for the synchronizing. And by the way, the last 2, really briefly, cultural dexterity is about taking the beautiful diversity that we have now unearthed and not only appreciate and celebrate it and honor it, but now I'm going to lean into Kelly because I learned something about her that she has something I don't have that is different for whatever reason. And I'm going to learn to be skilled to not only do it her way or even my way, but to together create in a culturally dexterous way, which is the 4th discipline, something unique and creative. And then the final one, and again, it's tied in. If you ask those 3 questions, you set the stage for the final one, which is power sharing. At any given moment, yes, there's always a team leader. We recommend team leaders, but team leaders less dictatorial, less directive, and more of a coach and a facilitator. And if this team leader and all the other team members know what's around in the team, then at one point, Kelly, another point, Andres, another point, Michelle, another point, Juan, can lean in with a level of expertise based on skill, certification, experience, personality, and take the lead because it makes sense. Like in the peloton, it's time for that person to go in front of the group so that everybody can draft behind them and then take turns. And that's what sets the stage. And it starts, again, with the simple questions that you asked me, but I tell you, that will open the door.
Now, this will be an interesting transition because, Andres, this is one of our traditions here at the Sourcing Hero. I'm going to give you 2 questions. You can pick either one, and there are no wrong answers, but I think it's an interesting follow-on to what we were just talking about. So your options are, what does the idea of a sourcing hero mean to you? Or what do you think heroism looks like in a business context?
Well, a sourcing hero, I don't know her last name now, but when I worked with her, Rosemary Keefe, she was talent acquisition extraordinaire. And she did all the best practices, with the, recruiting and all that stuff. But she would go to Target to just shop, and there'd be a checkout person who was extraordinary at what she did. And Rosemary was able to turn that into competencies.
Okay.
And she would say, you would be a great customer service person at the call center, making 6 times what you're making right now. You have this, you have that. Here's my card. And she did that wherever she went. And she just sourced from everywhere. And then to be a hero in corporate today, I think this is a time that requires a good amount of courage and character. And we're being tested every which way. We're having to make decisions when we're trying to figure out when we don't know what to do, we have to know what to do.
Right.
And that requires leading with risk-taking like never before. And that requires a great amount of courage and self-awareness.
Mm-hmm. Excellent points. Now, Andres, we will figure out the right way for people to get that rubric if we're interested. We will certainly provide information on the book. But if people are meeting you for the first time through this conversation, would like to connect with you directly, what is the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, for now, my email, and it's, so you see my name, Andres T, another dot, and then my last name, Tapia @gmail. I love my accent. That's the right way to spell it, but Gmail doesn't recognize it because it's not bicultural. So andres.t.tapia@gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, Andres, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for all of the hard work and experience you put into the book. I appreciate you being with us.
No, Kelly, thanks for all you do, and your show is great. And, hello to your listeners, and good luck.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sourcing Hero podcast. Join us again next time for more true stories of sourcing and business heroism performed by your colleagues and peers. Look for the Sourcing Hero wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe. Finally, don't forget, sourcing heroism is taking place all around us every day. Keep your eyes open and you're bound to see it. Until next time, I'm your host, Kelly Barner. Stay well, and always remember that you can be a hero too.